5 scores! Rick Vaughn.
We've decided to get ourselves back in the game again with our podcast.
Rick Vaughn, Gary Madden.
Probably the craziest story that you're ever going to hear about hockey.
We're going to be coming back to you on a regular basis.
You are listening to Squid and the Ultimate Leafs Fan.
Hello, Canada and hockey fans of the United States and Newfoundland, and an extra big hello to Canadian servicemen overseas.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 103 of the Squid and Ultimate Leaf Fan Show. I'm Mike Wilson, the Ultimate Leafs Fan. Joining me, as always, my winger, Ricky Squid Vibe. Squid, how's it going, man?
Going all right. You know, we just got back from Manitoulin Island and Cochrane, where we were up in the indigenous areas playing, and it was a blast. The last dinner we had after the second game, though, was great because the chief got up and spoke and said, okay, so anybody with gray hair gets to go up and get their food first. I said, oh, perfect. So I got to go to the front of the line.
Well, you know, age does have its benefits at times, you know, we find. You get the discount at the movie theaters, you know, we always ask for a senior discount and everything, you know, even though we're doing all these things, it does help sometimes.
Yep.
Well, Squid, let me preface our guest today before we bring him on. He made the NHL as an enforcer. He was drafted. He was good at it. He adjusted at an early age to what he had to do to make it. We've had numerous enforcers on this show, so that's nothing new. We fans love nothing more than living the life of a professional athlete through their stories. And our guest today has ones that will curl your hair. He's written a best-selling book retelling his story.
Mm-hmm.
This is the part I wrestle with after reading the book twice. While it's a story filled with tales that would leave readers and listeners blown away today, the real issue is the self-destruction of a human being who is in desperate need of help. Yeah, the player's responsible for his own actions, but the NHL or society, did they let him down, or do we let him down as a society? While we applaud the courage, determination, and strength it took for him to turn his life around, no question about that, the alarming part, he wasn't and isn't alone in this regard. Now, I know that sounds like a really cheery introduction for this poor guy, but please, without further ado, welcome our guest, Brantt Myhres. Mizey, thanks for joining us today, and how you keeping?
I'm doing well. Actually, it's just first day of snow today, so it's a good time for a podcast.
Oh, perfect.
Snow?
Yeah, in Cold Lake, Alberta. So,
Boy, I'm looking out my window and it's probably about 58 degrees and sunny. So I don't mean to make you feel bad, Brantt, but
no, we had such an incredible September and October that I was out trick or treating with my little one last night, and it was 7 degrees, and that's not too bad for the 31st of October. So
yeah.
Well, I'm not going to tell you guys where I am. So I'm in Florida for a week, so it's warm here. So it's, but I haven't been outside for 2 days. So there's my saving grace. I've been actually inside doing work. All right, I think we just cut off Brantt. We got to put him back in the screen there. Let's get him back in. Okay, there we go. All right, so Mike, let's start at the beginning. You grew up in a small town in Alberta, Swan Hills, in a trailer park in the middle of oil country. You started hockey at an early age, but your reason for playing is different than most kids. You didn't exactly come from a Leave It to Beaver family.
Yeah. You know, that was my earliest memory, I think, was Swan Hills in the trailer park with my mother and my sister. I think I was only maybe 4 or 5, and then it was my first memory of skating, and then it was obvious, and then my first memory of I guess you'd say domestic abuse with my mother, and so once I got out of Swan Hills relatively soon to go to my grandparents, it was always a nice I think it would have been maybe 6-hour trip.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess growing up like that in that environment, did that have any kind of effect on you later on in life? You know, I mean, that's not something that children should have to go through. And I'm just wondering if that maybe had any effect on you later on in life.
Yeah. Oh, Rick, I think writing the book was pretty heart-wrenching for me to go back and try and sort of relive that little child's memory, and but I carry that stuff with me till today. It's not, that stuff doesn't go away.
No.
I worked on it in treatment for 8 months, and but man, oh man, that I think that when children aren't protected by their parents when you're little, that kind of stuff has a everlasting effect on your psyche. And then, when I went to live with my grandparents, who I write in the book are like my saviors, you still wondered about your parents. And my dad, I never really saw that much until I was about 12. And my mom just lived down the road from my grandparents. So couldn't really put two and two together. I'm like, well, mom doesn't live that far away and dad's not that far away. And but again, until I went into my 5th and final treatment center in 2007, where I got to really, as they say, peel the onion back. I started to make a little bit of peace with it all, but I'll never really understand until I get maybe to the pearly gates and get to ask some serious questions there.
Well, we had Jim Thompson. Jim Thompson, I don't know if he know Jimmy or not, but he went through a similar background, came from out west, similar type background, but and he had his struggles along too. But he seems to have righted the path himself recently. Now he's coaching hockey and involved. But I want to get to your father, who, even though he had a troubling relationship with him at times throughout, as we read throughout the book, he was a strong influence on your growth as a hockey player.
Yeah, like I think as all young boys look at their dads as heroes, and when he wanted to come into my life when I was 12 and moved to Edmonton and playing, he coached my Pee Wee hockey team that year, and my dad was just so influential in like literally when I tell you guys this is the truth. Like my dad never missed taking me to, there was shinny every night. And it was around 7:00 at Parkland Arena, or even in Mill Woods. And my dad never missed. And my dad, I remember him, I think he had to borrow about $40 from a friend of his to take me on a weekend, like a little tournament trip. Mm-hmm. So really, like, he didn't have a lot, but what he did have, he gave to me, and obviously, when I went to junior in the Western League, he moved to Portland when I was 16, and then I got traded to Lethbridge the next year, and he moved to Lethbridge. So my dad never missed a game, and he was a real supportive role for me. Even once I got drafted, I remember him saying, "Son, this is nice, but this is just the first and really small step to hopefully, a long career."
Well,
yeah, it's funny.
Go ahead.
You mentioned that you never forget those things, and it's you're right. I mean, I've probably been through kind of similar things, and one of the things that I recall was the fact that, and wrote it in my book, was I don't ever remember my mother or my father saying to me, "I love you," and it was one of those things that I never forgot, and so when I talk to my two boys in any conversation, I never end that conversation unless I tell them I love them, because I do. And I want them to know that, I want them to realize that their father cares about them. And, growing up, I just never felt that in myself from my parents. And I guess you're right. I guess I'll never figure it out until, like you said, you get to the pearly gates and ask a few questions. You might get the answers.
Yeah. Well, I also, you guys didn't realize what my parents went through at such a young age. I mean, my mother got my mother had me when she was 18. My dad had me when he was, I think, 20. And now that I have children, like I couldn't fathom trying to take care of children at 18 years old, so as they say, they were doing the best that they could at the time. And so, yeah, my dad passed away, I think it was about 3 years ago now. And I really miss him. Like it's crazy that even though I write in there that we had a lot of indifferences, and a lot of that was my fault, and that was on my shoulders for the character that I was, I guess, embarking on as an addict. And Lord knows how many other people I let down. But today, I think that of the man that I'm still trying to turn into, but definitely made an effort a lot of years ago to change.
Well, I don't want to give away too much of the book for people who we hope will go and read Painkiller, because it's a definite must read. And I'm going to say this right now, as an avid reader of books, it's one of the most, I don't know what you want to say fascinating, but it's one that really struck a chord with me. And I just want to frame your situation a little bit more for you, so people really get an idea of what you were faced with growing up. And you're this kid that could never get a break. I mean, even a simple gesture on the part of the Big Brother program, trying to help you and reach out and help, you turned out that the guy who picked you was a predator.
Yeah.
And you had to deal with this as a kid. I mean, it's just absolutely mind-boggling that you would go through this before you even 12 years old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was something that I think I was 10 when I had the Big Brother. And it was interesting. That story actually wasn't in my manuscript that I wanted published. But my publisher, my editor, who was amazing, his name's Nick Garrison, said, "Okay, we're done." And he goes, "Anything else?" And I'm like, "No, man." I go, I've literally
What more do you want?
I go, "I've told you everything." And he goes, "Are you sure?" And I go, "Well, there's this one thing that I've never told anybody." And he goes, "Like, you've never mentioned it to anybody?" And I said, "No, I haven't." I said, "It happened when I was 10. And he said, "Well, why don't you write it down?" And he said, "Send it over and we'll discuss it." And I wrote it out, and he just called me and said, Brantt, he said, there's so many things that you already put in this book to hopefully try and help somebody. He said, maybe this is another one. And that was tough, because that's another thing I haven't gotten over. There's so many things in that book, and that's why it's hard for me to even read the book, is because it just starts slicing and dicing, the trauma, I think, as a child. But and maybe that had a part to do with when I got older, that the role that I played was to protect other people, because maybe I wasn't protected when I was little.
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair assessment. And like I like what you said, though, because it was similar with me. My mother had 4 kids by the time she was 22 years old.
Yeah.
And I mean, I couldn't even imagine having 4 kids when I was like, my dad might have been a couple of years older.
Yeah.
He might have been 24, but still, that's pretty young to have 4 kids, and try to keep things together. And I can't even imagine going through that as a 24-year-old. I mean, I don't think I could have done it.
I know. It was, admirable, to say the least.
Yeah.
Now,
yeah. And, and in saying that, the fact that I mentioned what I mentioned before, but my parents did without going out for dinner or going on trips or anything, so that we could have, hockey equipment, good hockey equipment and stuff like that. So I give them a lot of credit for for that, because it helped me pave my way to the National Hockey League. There was a lot of other things that weren't great, but that was one of the things that I'll never forget, is that they always made sure we had what we needed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, around your Pee Wee year, you became infatuated, along with millions of others, with this skinny kid for Brantford, Ontario, playing for the Oilers by the name of, well, you're smiling already because I know this is a big part of your life, Wayne Gretzky.
Yeah.
I only bring this up because the admiration was there for you at the highs of your life and at the lows. And I'll take it one step further. Even this discarded roll of used tape was an inspirational reminder for you. And maybe you want to tell that story.
Yeah. My dad bought me a ticket, and but it wasn't low. Like, it was in Northlands Coliseum. Ricky, you remember? Like,
Yeah.
you could get top seats for $8 or something.
Yeah.
And as I was walking down I just saw 2 open seats literally right next to the Oilers bench, and I just went and sat in it, and nobody kicked me out. So I remember Wayne coming off the ice, and I just loved everything, the shirt tucked in, the baby powder on all this stuff. And so he comes out and he takes his tape off his stick and he throws it on the ground with all this spit and whatever, right? And I looked at the trainer and I just said, I begged him. I said, can you grab that tape? He's like, what? So I grabbed the tape and I literally had it next to my bed for a few years. I just was infatuated with Gretz, and that stayed with me for a long time. Yeah.
Well, how old were you then?
I think I was 12 when that happened. Yeah. And so when I got drafted by Tampa Bay when I was 18, I remember them drafting Brantt Gretzky, and to me, Brent was just as big as Wayne, and Walter was just as big as Wayne, and and Phyllis and Glenn, and I just that whole thing. I used to have dreams about skating in their backyard, and all this kind of stuff. So it was pretty cool.
It was funny. It's funny that you mentioned that. I had a similar thing when I was 12 in PEI. So the Montreal Canadiens came in to play their farm team, the Halifax Voyageurs. So I skipped school with 3 of my buddies. We waited for the trainer. He came. He said, "Do you want to help bring the bags in?" We said, "Yeah." So we took them in. He said, "Okay, be back here at whatever, 4:30, 5 o'clock." Says, "You 2 guys go to the Voyageurs. You guys stay here." And here I am in the Montreal Canadiens dressing room, handing out socks and tape to Belleville, Lafleur, Cornway, Shutt, you name it. They were all there. Then he gives me a track top. He says, "Take the sticks over to the bench." And I know my mother and my aunt were in the stands, and I'm walking across the ice and I hear one of them say, "That looks like Rick." And the other goes, "It is. And then they start screaming. But what an experience as a 12-year-old kid to be in a room with all these legends of the game and handing them socks and tape, and it was remarkable. And then the World Juniors, when I was 18 years old, we dressed in their weight room. They took all their weights out. They put stalls in there. So we're showering in the Canadian showers. We're walking around the dressing room every day. We get to watch them practice every day. And I mean, I consider myself pretty lucky to have had those encounters, and I think it helped me down the road when I got to the NHL because, I respected these guys so much and had the opportunity to meet them when I was a kid.
Rick, I wish I could show you in my room in the basement where my grandparents. My dresser, and I was a big fan of putting posters on walls, and Wayne was on one side and Mario was on the other, right? And but my dresser, I had these hockey cards that were sticky, and Ricky Vibe was on there. Ricky Vibe was on there. You were next to Dave Brown. And Brad.
I never got very close to Dave Brown. I didn't want to.
Not many did.
But you were one of my hockey stickers on my desk when I was little, and
wow.
And there was, I just remember McCrimmon, you, Dave Brown, and then I can't remember, but I remember Rick Vibe. Yeah, the helmet, the bigger helmet, right? You had the, anyways, yeah, crazy.
The Stan Mikita helmet.
The Stan Mikita helmet. The round bucket. Now, Mikey, your first taste of junior hockey came with the tryout with the Bonneville Pontiacs. Now, people don't realize, like, the way you described this team, it was like a scene made out of slap shot, the way these guys looked and acted.
It was junior B.
Yeah.
I was 15 and I could have played midget and my dad said, well, that junior B league's pretty good. And it was a pretty decent league, but I was a skinny kid at turned 15 and I went to camp and I made it. And as I write in there, it was, oh man. From walking out on an Indian reserve in Saddle Lake, and I just remember they would spit tobacco at you, chewing tobacco, and I was one of the only kids that had a full face mask on back then because I had to. But yeah, it was it literally was something like at a slap shot, and that whole hazing thing that happened that I write about was horrifying as a young kid. And thank God it was only 10 games, and that league folded, and now they're the Bonneville Pontiacs junior A team, which is a great organization, but didn't want people to get the two mixed up because they were called the Pontiacs too, the junior B team.
Well, but these guys are loaded with tattoos and beers, and they just were like a roughest looking. And here you're a skinny 15-year-old kid looking at this, and you're thinking, well, am I in a motorcycle gang or what is this?
You guys remember the Ultimate Warrior?
Mm-hmm.
I swear to God, this is a true story. This guy, his name was Ren Land, and he came in with the face painted. He had 666 written on the back of his shirt. He had war paint, and it was just like Metallica was going like crazy in the dressing room. And I'm like, what am I doing here? And finally my dad he said, you're done. Yeah.
Like what is going through your mind at that point? You're 15 years old and you're seeing all this stuff. Like, that's incredible.
See, I also thought, oh, well, if junior B's like this, because I was listed already at that time by Portland, and I thought, well, what's Portland going to be like if this is junior hockey? What am I getting myself into? And obviously, the Western League was very professional and so different, but yeah, it was crazy.
Well, for those listening who don't understand, if you're listed, it means you're protected by a junior club and they own your rights. And this was an age when Brantt would have been separating himself from the pack, and so standing out, and that's when they go and try and protect these players. So talk about, it took you a couple of shots, but you finally made it in the WHL with Portland. Yeah. But it was also during that period where you changed directions as a player, using more, let's say, your pugilistic skills that you didn't realize you had. And now all of a sudden started to get everybody's attention.
Yeah. So that would have been my first camp with the Winter Hawks. Yeah, I was 16 there. Crazy.
Wow.
And it's funny because I tried to tuck my shirt in like Gretz. I thought that would help, but
you got it in the front.
Yeah, and I got it on the wrong side. He did it on his right side. But so anyways, I ended up fighting. My first fight ever was a backup goalie after the scrimmage ended. And I found out at that point that I was left-handed because I never fought before. And I did really well. And then the next camp, I fought a kid named Josh Erdman, who was another big high profile 16-year-old, and we fought 3 times in the same game. as a 16-year-old. And so I think from that point on, after those 3 fights, they said, "Oh, 6'4", 210 pounds, can skate half decent, and let's give him a shot on the team." And then, I led the league as a 16-year-old in fights for 16-year-olds, anyways, that year. And then my 17-year-old year was just pretty insane. It was almost every second night.
Well, I just want to say something here. I'm going to take a quote from the book. In the book, you said, and I'm going to quote you here. If you've never been in a hockey fight, I can tell you what I learned that day when you started fighting. It's pretty great to win, but it feels even better not to lose. I was pumped, but the real elation I realized later was relief.
Yeah, it's so true. And it, and I'm not tooting my own horn, but never really got beat down in junior, and I had a lot of fights over those 3 years. I believe over 4 years, and then we played. We played Ottawa one night in Tampa, and I fought a guy named Denny Vial, and
oh boy,
and Denny Vial's jersey and everything came off right away. And I had nothing to grab onto, and I just remember hearing the smacking sound, hey, and him literally saying to me, because I was on my knees, he said, "Get up," and it was the first time where when I talk about that losing feeling, it was, to me, it was devastating. It was in Tampa, and there was 19,000 people, and none of my teammates were standing up this time and clapping the boards, like they usually do. And so I got my first taste of humility that night. It definitely it wasn't fun.
What was it like? And I got to ask this because we had other guys on, like when you were going into a game the night before. Like, was it difficult for you to sleep? Was it tough, thinking about who's on the other team and who I might have to fight that night?
Yeah.
Or is that something you adjusted to?
Well, I think players nowadays, like I was talking with a friend, and, some guys understand, like Luch, who came in the league in 08, a little bit back then, but we never got a night off. Like every team had probably, I'd say, at least 2 heavyweights in the lineup. So for me, it was the night before. The sleep was obviously, it didn't go very well, and then the pregame skate. When you go back and try and eat and get a rest, and I couldn't sleep. I wasn't one of those guys that really looked forward to doing that job. I did it more out of trying to protect my teammates. So I would try and maybe sometimes look for an excuse to fight somebody if they maybe just even hit my guy a little bit too high, just to get my own brain wrapped around that I had to protect him. It wasn't even a dirty hit or anything, so yeah.
Well, it's funny. I remember my first fight in the National League. We're playing in Boston. I go into the boards with Stan Jonathan. Okay. Oh, yeah. And I don't know what the heck happened, but something happened and the gloves came off for both of us. Well, I hit him right square in the nose with 3 of the hardest punches I could throw. And he just went, "Urgh." And I went, "Oh no." So I grabbed on and then he caught me with an uppercut down. And then I'm kind of wobbling. He throws me on the ice and he says, "Don't do that again, kid." Yeah. And I said, "I won't."
Well, who were the big boys on your team back then? Was Bomber there when you were there?
No, we didn't have that. Like Jim Korn was supposed to be one of our tough guys.
Yeah.
We really didn't have anybody. I mean, until Wendell came in. But then, you know, we didn't want Wendell fighting that much because we wanted him on the ice. But I mean, we had like Barry Melrose, but, you know, I didn't consider Barry, you know, a heavyweight. Like when we would play Edmonton, they would have McSorley, they would have, I forget his name now, but the real tough guy, Semenko. Then they had they had about 5 guys.
McClellan.
So whenever you played them, I mean, you know, you didn't go after anybody because they had 5 guys that would be coming after you.
Yeah. I was going to say, okay, Mike, now here's where you're in with the Winterhawks. You're all in. Guys, I'm sure challenged you, and no sense being a good fighter. If you want to move forward and take it to the next level in national hockey, you have to show them that you're a great fighter. Or I'm paraphrasing here, but is that kind of the attitude you had to take to get yourself really noticed?
Well, I think more to be an active fighter, so to fight a lot. And my dad said, you know, son, and you know, you're 17, it's your draft year, and how bad do you want to get drafted? And I said, well, obviously, Dad, I want to get drafted really bad. And he said, well, you're going to have to go out and lead the whole Canadian Hockey League in fights. And I'm like, the whole league? He's like, yeah. He says, the whole league. And he goes, if you lead the league in fights, he said, I promise you somebody will pick you. And so I did. I led the whole Canadian Hockey League in fights. And, you know, again, it was, and in a way, it was good. My dad was in the stands for a lot of those games because, you know, you're always looking in. I knew where he sat, same spot every night, and you know, it just gave me that little extra confidence booster. Maybe if he was watching.
Now,
well, how big were you at that point in junior?
Oh well, I was done growing height wise, so I was 6'4", and then my 17-year-old year, I started to put on quite a bit of weight. Like I think I got up to maybe 6'4" to 218, maybe something like that.
Wow.
Yeah, this was my. This was 91. I got drafted in 92. So this year I was about 210 pounds. And then the next one, I put on some weight, maybe an extra 10 pounds, maybe. It helped to be tall, and it helped to, you know, weigh around that 220 mark, and then to be a left-hander as well.
Well, now, I know my son was drafted in 07. He's still playing in the ECHL in Cincinnati. He's a captain, player assistant coach. He's 6'6", 245. But he never got that opportunity to play in the National Hockey League, you know. And it's just one of those things. But he enjoys playing, and he's the same way. Like, he doesn't fight that much if he doesn't need to, unless something happens to one of his teammates. And if something happens, he'll be the first guy there. And, you know, and I love watching him play. I've always loved watching him play. And in fact, they played this morning at 10:30 in the morning. I said, I can't even imagine playing a hockey game at 10:30 in the morning. But it was one of those school day games. And I said, how hard would that be to play at 10:30 in the morning? Like, I can't even imagine.
Well, Squid, come with me. You can play one of my beer league games, okay? And you'll get a introduction real fast to how it is, okay? At 11:30 at night, too, okay? You can have both. So, okay, now, Brantt, in junior, you were underage to drink when you first went there, and you really didn't partake with the lads at first. Now, obviously, being a junior hockey player, small town, all the adulation you get from the fans, the media, etc., girls, all this stuff. When did the gloves arrive? I'm trying to make a joke here. Rather, the bottle top come off and it start to go off, unwind.
When I got traded to Lethbridge, because we couldn't drink in Portland. Then actually, to be honest, I wasn't even a drinker at 16. Like as I write about it, I'd just pour the beers out to make it look like I was holding a can because I didn't want to feel left out. But there was this country bar in Lethbridge that I remember. I don't know who it was that ordered 50 drinks, and they were back then, they were rye and Coke. And I just I just remember drinking it and hearing the music playing and seeing the girls dancing. And then I had 2, and then I had 3, and then I was in Wonderland. And from that moment on, it something sparked in me that this was something that I was never ever going to give up, no matter what. And as I write about it, I rode that horse a long way without getting off.
Yeah, you did.
Oh boy. Yeah, it's funny. You remember that first time all the time, and I remember. So it was very similar. Like it made me feel. It relaxed me, I guess, and I felt good, and then but. It's kind of catch-22 situation where you do it, everything's great, but later on it becomes something that you have to battle, I guess, to get out of because it's not working.
Exactly. Yeah, it stopped working. Yeah, exactly.
Well, now the fans love the Brawlers. They always do, and they always like the big guys. And so here you are again in town, and I'm sort of leading you into this also. I'm assuming that the answer is going to come. By this point in your career, you're probably very popular with the fans, but that extra attention can be good and bad, because while you're getting the attention of the girls and the extra people in town, there are guys out there that look at you and they figure, well, what's he got that I don't have besides the fact he plays hockey? I want to challenge this guy. So I'm sure trouble followed you that way as well, and that didn't help your situation.
Sure, the bar fights, yeah. The bar fights, I really lucky. A couple things that I've never been charged with were bar fights or drinking and driving. As the amount of times that I was in both of those is pretty wild to think that nothing bad happened. But yeah, no, but again, more of those fights had to do with one of my friends getting picked on at the bar versus me just like wanting to go out and fight somebody. Cause I was doing it all the time. My knuckles were all beat up. So I wasn't looking for fights, but after a few drinks, if one of my friends got picked on or a girl got, touched the wrong way, then I would try and handle it.
Wow.
Well, I was going to ask you also then, so your draft night, the night of your draft, well, you get taken by Tampa. You thought you were going to go higher. Your agent thought you were going to go higher, and you did, but you got drafted. So that's the good news. Talk about your interact first. Well, first off, there's 2 things. One, the night of the draft, you went out on your own after, and this time you were full-fledged into the partying. What was your mindset at that point? I mean, where I'm going with this, did you just think this is part of who I am, what I do? So I'm just going out. Now that I got drafted, that part of the day's over with. Now I'm doing this.
Oh yeah. I mean, again, like to me, it wasn't really that big of a problem at that time. I just turned 18 and the draft was in the summer, and I didn't really think anything of it other than everybody else at the draft was out too. like when you're seeing all your other teammates out and everybody's doing the same thing you are, it's sort of hard to go, well, what am I doing wrong at this point? But it wasn't until a little bit later on where I'd start to or I wouldn't go to bed till 5 or 6 in the morning and then try to practice at 10 o'clock. That's when you knew that, oh geez, like this is taking a priority over my job. And that's when I started to notice it. Now, talk about your interaction with Phil. Now, there's 2 stories here. One, your first time you meet Phil. I'd just like to know what the exchange, but also there's a very funny story in the book about in your first camp and top pick Roman Hammerlick. Yeah. Hammer, that was crazy. I can't, I think I wrote about it, how he dropped his gloves first.
Yes.
Yeah. And so the first time I met Phil was the draft night, and then I just remember he was talking to Brantt Gretzky, and I was just I couldn't believe where I was, and he was awesome because my grandparents were there, and my sister, and so he talked to everybody, and he said that I just remember him saying, he goes, "The fans are going to love you," and you take that and cherish that. And then obviously when that happened with Roman, we fought, and then to see him come running down the stairs and screaming at me, and but it was all I guess like a PR move maybe, because deep down he loved it, and he told me.
He told you that the next day.
He told me he loved it. Yeah. Yeah. So it was a pretty cool story, and excellent general manager to play for.
Squid?
Yeah. So that's the beginning, obviously. And then obviously as time goes on, things get a little bit more out of hand and that sort of thing. Like, I mean, I remember those times myself, and now the league was a little different when I played, where, they didn't look at that as something bad, if you drank a lot or anything. But so the first time that happened and the league came down on you, like, how did that feel? Like, obviously it must have been terrible.
Yeah, I remember that day really clear. Bobby Clark told me in Philly that he knew that I was drinking a lot. He knew that I was hanging out with Lindros, and that he said that, well, Big E makes $8.5 million and you make $475,000. He said, "Who do you think's leaving?" And I'm like, well, that's probably me. He said, "Listen, I'm going to give you one more chance to put the bottle down." This was probably around February, and if I hear about you drinking again, he said, "Brantt, I'm releasing you." He goes, "You're done." And so I think I had maybe like a week where I didn't drink, and I was doing a lot of cocaine. That was the first team that I was doing a lot of cocaine with. And so I thought I'd hide in a bar one night, and I went in and had this hat. I had it pulled right down. It was after a game, and I sat in the corner with this girl and drinking my beer, and I didn't know this, but one of the head scouts was sitting at the same bar. So Paul Coffey called me in the morning, and he called me Knuckles, and he goes, "Knuckles," he says, "Clarky put you on waivers. What's going on?" And I go, "Yeah, right." And he goes, "No, he did." He goes, "Go get the paper." So I'm driving to the rink 100 miles an hour, and I get the paper back then, because that's how you got your information. And Brantt Myhres on waivers. And so I went down to the Philadelphia Phantoms, and it was so bad that within, I think it would have been 2 weeks, because it was at the end of the year when I got sent down, that Paul Holmgren called me in, and he said, we want you nowhere near this team. He said, "Pack your fucking bag." And he said, "We'll get you a flight home." He said, but we want you fucking gone. And so that morning, I just had that first breakdown. I didn't know what to do. And I called the league, and I said, I don't know what's going on with me. I said, but I can't stop what's happening. And they said, don't worry, we'll have somebody there tomorrow to pick you up. And then I don't know, Ricky, if you know Dan Cronin or not, but
no.
Yeah. so they flew Cronin in, and he flew me to my first treatment center in Los Angeles, and that was my first taste of rehab. That was the first one out of the 5 that I ended up going to.
Well, we had nobody that would from the league back then. I mean, there was nobody to talk to about that, which was kind of sad, you know. Like, I mean, I knew I had an issue.
Yeah.
But I had no one that I could talk to from the league or from our organization or anything to get help. And, you know, so I mean, it was very, very difficult and, you know, back then it was different. Everybody was out drinking, you know, after every game, almost every night, you know, but again, not having someone that you could rely on to help you was very, very difficult.
Yeah. Well, my understanding is when Proby went to jail and then he got out. That's when the program was introduced.
Yeah.
It was made after Bobby got out of jail to have some type of a rehabilitation program for the players versus just like when Fuhr got caught, suspended for a year and see you later, right? Like,
yeah.
So I think, it was, you know, thank God for that program, because if they didn't reach out on, I guess it was my 5th rehab, and I was done playing, like they didn't have to pay for nothing. And they reached out and they flew me to Oregon and they paid for 8 months of inpatient treatment, and they paid for me to go back to school. And it was just, the gifts that you get to, you know, when you're, I think, really, really at that point trying to turn your life around.
Yeah, I mean, they have that program now, and they had it when and they paid for me to go to rehab. It was, I can't remember what they called it, but it was all the fine money would go into a fund that they would use for former players to get help. And so I had to go through a process with the league and stuff like that in order to get that financial aid to go to rehab. You know, because I mean, it's expensive. It was, I think it was like $40-some thousand. It was like for 30 days. Yeah. And then, you know, it was kind of funny. It was, I mean, it was the best thing I ever did in my life, obviously. But so it was supposed to be 30 days. And there was this girl that was coming off of cocaine, and I forget what they gave her. There's something that they were giving her to help her come down from it. But anyway, you weren't supposed to bring food to your room. She did all the time. And then she would come into our group meetings and literally come in late and then fall asleep. And then during the meeting, somebody would say something and she would wake up and she'd put her hand up and then she'd start talking. And I said to the person leading our group, I said, this is wrong. Like, you know, this girl comes in, she disrupts our group meetings and everything. The next thing I know, I get called up to the office of the head person, and they said, we're going to keep you for 15 more days. And I said, why? They said, well, anger management. I said, what? Like, what do you mean anger management? And, you know, she said, well, your leader in your group session said that you were very, very vocal and swearing at the girl and all that. And I said, no, I wasn't. I said, I just made a point that she shouldn't be able to disrupt our meetings. And so anyway, I ended up staying another 15 days.
And the good news is Charlie Sheen was your counselor in anger management.
Yeah.
No, I want to say, Brantt, and you spent time back and forth between NHL and the minors. Now, I think that by this time, now you're in rehab, your partying was getting out of control, obviously. But there's two things here. One of the minors, I'd almost think it'd be worse for you, especially with guys playing out the string and soaking just the last few years, be almost more influential for you to go out and party with. But as we've said before, you know, you had this penchant for strippers. Now, as we've said in the show a lot of times, any player who played in NHL in the 70s, 80s.
Well, who doesn't?
Not one guy can say he didn't go to Chez Paris in Montreal. Okay, at least
Oh, yeah.
once. Okay, so that.
At least.
But one of the comments I want to make here, another quote from the book that I found very fascinating was, you were by this time you were full blown, you're an addict, and you've admitted it. I spent a lot of time with strippers back then, more than most guys, I'll admit, but it's not hard to explain why. They always wanted to have as much fun as I was having, and those are the kind of people I wanted to be with.
Yeah. Well, hence my relationship's not working out, with women, because I don't know. I hated the word, like, people would say, you just don't know how to turn it off, and I didn't know how to turn it off. I would always be the last guy at the strip joint when it closed. And then you're trying to take one of them out for a drink after or whatever. And the next thing you know, you guys are doing cocaine till 9 a.m. and you got to be at the rink at 9:30. And, I just didn't have a button to turn off. And, but yeah, there was no judgment going on when you had those girls dancing on poles. That's
yeah. Now, what about some of the guys you played with? Did you find it was the minors? Did you could get in trouble anywhere at that point?
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, and then if you got a bit of a bankroll, I wasn't making a lot of money. I mean, the most money I ever made was $650,000 US, I think, back in the day, and
that was 300 more than I ever made.
And you scored 800 goals more than I did. But relatively speaking, right? It wasn't looking back. I was broke in 2005. Like, so all I'm saying is that when you have a little bit of a bankroll, and especially in the summers, Ricky, where there's no alarm clock and it's just hell's bells for a few months, and it's crazy.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I don't think a lot of people understand. They look at it as something bad, that you're a bad person. Mm-hmm. They don't realize that it's a disease like cancer, like any other disease, that, you have it, you get into it, and you don't know what to do.
Well, you
don't know how to turn it off.
No,
and I don't think, I don't think a lot of people realize that.
Yeah, I agree with you. Well, you wouldn't look at somebody that was, like you said, was dying from cancer and think that they're a bad person. I think that if you're not educated in this field, you think this is a willpower thing. Mm-hmm. You don't understand the disease, the brain concept behind it, and the thinking that goes into it. And sometimes the rationality of, like when I wrote about it in the book, where I went to get reinstated back into the NHL after being suspended for a year, and I decided to get a hotel room at where the doctor from the league is staying at, and I decided to do cocaine till 8 a.m. and our meetings at 9, and thinking that's a good idea like that. So obviously that's insane to think that way, but I didn't think so at the time. And that's where you talk about the disease aspect, until I started to understand that I have something that doesn't want me to do very well in life, and it talks to me quite a bit. And how can I quiet those voices when they appear? And then how can I differentiate those voices from reality? And it took a lot of work.
Well, to that point you just made, and to that particular incident, that's one of the things that I found very troubling. And not from your perspective, from the NHL's perspective, because there you are, the state you're in, you knew that this is all over here. Like, I'm done for officially as this. And then these guys proceeded to congratulate you on your sobriety and what a wonderful job you've done for the last year. And welcome back to the league.
Oh, yeah. It was, you mean
Yeah, when you're up all night and you're going and crossing these guys and they're congratulating you and being sober. And you can even keep your eyes open.
Yeah. I don't know. Again, it's like, I don't know how I was able to get through any of that stuff. Like,
Brantt, I think we were all good at hiding it. I think that's one of the things as an addict.
Yeah.
I think you're very good at hiding those things, as I found.
I think you're right. I think that if I was really drunk that morning, I think the cocaine leveled me out. Because I showed up and I wasn't like slurring or anything, but I was higher than a kite. And I just remember when I left, I said, did that just
happen?
Did that just happen? Like, I'm getting reinstated after that? Like, now,
was the doctor there at that meeting?
Yeah, he was. Yeah, it was Mr. Lewis.
I mean, like, what baffles me, I guess, from a league perspective, is that, like, the doctor who knows about all this stuff didn't realize that.
Well,
how could he? You know,
you got to remember that he was getting information from Dan Cronin, and up until that point, I was sober, and I was going to AA meetings and getting my things signed and all the things that they wanted me to do. So for me to show up that next morning, it wasn't like there was a long history. I had, I think, 6 or 8 months of sobriety behind me. And it was like one of those scenes in that movie Flight with Denzel Washington, where he's going into the courtroom the next day, and he sees the fridge open with the shiny bottles. And that was exactly what happened to me. I opened up the fridge, and there they were, and I thought maybe I'll just have one and then watch a movie. And it didn't. Yeah, it was some wild times. Yeah.
Well, you watched the movie. You were just the star of it.
Yeah.
But I think that's what a lot of people. I think that's what a lot of people don't understand is that you think you can have one. They don't understand that disease, you can't have one. Because if you have one, it's then 2, it's 4, it's 8, it's 20, it's whatever, and I don't think a lot of people really understand that. And that bothers me sometimes.